So, like I said, we have three presentations today. The first one by Carina Maldonado Mariscal, who will present actually joint work that I've been involved in as well. And then we have a presentation by Sheikh Fayez, if I pronounce that kind of correctly. And Monica Edwards-Schachter will present last. Yeah, like I said, let's not waste too much time. Carina, the floor is yours. 15, 20 minutes for presentation, then some time for questions.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. I will share the presentation. 1 second. Can you see that? Wait.
It's still loading, but wait a second. Now we see the kind of the presenter mode, so it's not full screen.
I have two screens, so let me check. Should work now with the full
Yeah,
presentation mode. Yeah,
perfect. Thanks.
perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so Rick already introduced a bit. I'm Karina from TU Dortmund, Germany, and we work together in this paper. Is pretty much work in progress, but yeah, so I would like to introduce that today for you. So we are talking here about social exnovation, reflections between termination and renewal of social practices. It's quite slow. You don't see any change, right? No. Exactly. So this work pretty much built on the reflection that sustainability requires new thinking about innovation and how different discourses of innovation have been building on this transformative innovation, mission-oriented innovation systems, dedicated innovation. And we are working on this from the perspective, okay, not only technological innovation is necessary, but of course, social innovation. And this also demands discontinuation of practices and exnovation. So I will go in a minute to explain what actually we mean with these terms. Exactly, just an introduction slide of reflecting about social innovations, where we see that all definitions have in common that there is a focus on the new. I think many of you already know this literature very well, but interesting from here is probably just to know that, okay, social innovation refers to new social practices, new social relationships, alliances, and strategies for social change. But more concretely to the topic, so we are building on prior research. So we actually decided to present this today to explain a bit on this work. But we have been working in analyzing innovation pathways in the global south and now in north, where we have seen the discourses of exnovation and buen vivir. And based on what we have learned from exnovation literature here, we are building this work. I just put a slide just to let you know that we have this work. But now, what is exnovation? So what we found out is that exnovation is the purposive termination of existing infrastructures, technologies, products, and practices. It is discussed often regarding the termination of technologies or sustainability transitions. So in this context, but it's really with regards to social practices or social innovation. So we found this as a gap in the literature where new practices needs to be terminated and other ones to be introduced. But the challenge for Exnovation is the negative perception that is built in the concept itself. What we see, okay, Exnovation is usually related to losing something, to going out of something, to terminating a practice. What we found very interesting here is that we see two different kinds of Exnovation in the literature review that we have done previously. So on the one hand, we see that, okay, some author says, okay, Exnovation, we need Exnovation for the sake of going out of something that is not sustainable. On the other hand, we see that Exnovation is needed for the sake of making space for new things or for new innovation. This was a bit, a bit surprising for us to see these streams of discourses. So on the left side, most of this literature is based on the ecological concerns and environmental concerns, for example, all these energy transitions and going out of the coal in Germany, for example, and terminating unsustainable practices and technologies. But on the other hand, authors like November Having, they say, well, it's necessary, this removal of innovation once they are no longer beneficial, like technologies that we don't need anymore, but also practices that we need to go out and make space for new innovations. So we were reflecting on that, and that's why this idea came up about social Exnovation. What do we actually can understand from this, and how can we study this? So we understand that we need to unlearn unsustainable practices, and some examples where we can see this is mobility practices or high meat consumption at social gatherings, in the sense that, okay, there is more consciousness about sustainable practices, but also about the decisions that we as citizens can do and change things. So we just use these two examples, but in the sense of renewing these kind of practices. So we are seeing now that, for example, these programs, at least in Europe, you can find one of these in most of the cities, Bike to Work, where the universities or different institutions create a program and support their employees to go to work by bike in order to decrease the use of cars, but also the increase of vegetarian barbecue or different options in social gatherings, which is becoming more and more common now in Europe. I guess the reality in Brazil it's quite different, but at least I remember very good vegetarian restaurants in Rio de Janeiro. So in this sense, social Exnovation requires the need to unlearn unsustainable practices, like these two examples, but also to unlearn obsolete or inefficient practices. For example, there is a couple of studies in medical practices where they see, okay, we don't need these practices anymore, so we need to go out and implement something new. But also in education. So, and here is where our analysis starts, and we are very in early work here. We have thought about it, cases to understand these phenomena and to see how social innovation can be explored. So we are thinking in these examples like carefree cities, carefree movement in different European cities, and the end of the use of war, which is, yeah, I will go in a minute to that, but it has been a lot of kind of a social movement behind, and even though it's not completely an end practice, but it has been at least ended in many places. And especially the whale meat consumption, the case of Japan, which we consider is quite interesting. And for example, in the case of Carefree City, we are thinking in cities like Hamburg and Oslo, which have developed plans to become partly private, carefree. Brisbane, Australia, which motivations are mainly urban sustainability and the creation of spaces. So here we are mainly talking about decisions of going out from specific practices of car use and creating alternatives. And of course, this would help the reduction of all the greenhouse gases and so on. So on the one hand, this case, as I say, sorry, I have to close my window because it's quite loud now. So the end of the use of war, which we were thinking about the historical perspective, and when in the 90s there were huge social protests against the 4 years. And this has created a kind of a practice that is not socially accepted anymore in several countries, a kind of social consciousness. We don't want this anymore, so we are going out of this practice. And that's how we see we can better understand social innovation. So we have some small examples of this in Germany. Well, we see that there is no real demand, that many people want to wear it, and there is enough supply to change the grandmother's coat into something else. So we have all these small shops where you can see the picture from the right side on the downside, where you can see, okay, we know that many people have inherited this kind of coats because are very expensive, but actually nobody wants to wear it. So they are offering a kind of alternatives to use this since are already there. Yeah. So what we see is that there is a kind of shame to wear for. And on the upper part, we see just an online platform, which is very common in Germany, which is used to sell secondhand things. And we see that the prices, for example, of this kind of coats is very cheap, like 70 euros. Yeah, because there is no real demand to buy this. The third example, and that we are thinking about, is whale meat consumption in Japan. So we have seen that the consumption has decreased, and there is, well, despite the repeated pressure from Japan to commercialize whaling, the country is not really consuming that much. So sometimes you find this kind of meat in the supermarkets with a very low prices and discounts and so on. But whaling is an essential part of the national heritage in the country. So there is a lot of festivals, songs, rituals around this. But they are still organizing these festivals to enact this Imagine Whaling Heritage, but the celebration of whaling heritage is not contingent on the continuation of whaling today. So we see a kind of trying to go out of this practice, but it's quite complicated because it's very linked with old traditions, but still they want to keep the tradition and perhaps going completely out from this practice. So yeah, so we are thinking on this, like how to understand this social exnovation in the sense of going out of practices. So if we create something new, we would see that a kind of social innovation would appear, where new practices, new technologies, or new social relationships may appear. But if we're going completely out of a practice, so we see it as termination and a kind of phase out of the practice. And we found a very interesting paper which is talking about transition pain when you are actually going out from a practice, and that there is a kind of collective pain because you need first to accept that you are losing something, you're going out of something. And well, yeah, these are our reflections on this and our ideas to explore social exnovation. And in summary, we think that the transition to sustainability requires the exnovation of past innovations and the removal of existing unsustainable social practices. And in order to understand these dynamics, we need to study social exnovation alongside the study of social innovation, because on the one hand, we see the going out, but at the same time is creating something new, more sustainable, more socially accepted or desired. And social innovation policies should pay more attention to these path dependencies of social practices and the challenges and this transition pain of exnovating old practices. And I think I'm still on time. Yeah, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Karina. Yeah, excellent timekeeping. We would have about 10 minutes for questions. Maybe also 11 minutes to divide the time equally, but if you can keep it in 10, that would be nicely back on the schedule. Maybe you can stop the screen sharing so that we can see everybody again. And I open the floor for questions, comments from the audience. If there are none, then I'd suggest we move on to the next presentation and allow ourselves some time in the end, maybe to reflect on all three presentations, or maybe also come back with questions for Karina if something comes up in between.
Thanks.
Well, I have a short question. In your paper, you analyze all this concept of innovation from the point of view of the institutionalization of practices, social practices, and social relationships, because it's something like a transition. Have you considered this perspective of institutionalization of social practices?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, actually, yes. And we were thinking in actually analyze different types or cases to see which ones are already institutionalized, which are in process, and which have first started from the policy level, from the top to down, so to see the different mechanisms and dynamics of this transition. So yeah, thank you, Monica.
Thanks. If there are no further questions or comments, I suggest we move on to the next presentation. Thanks, Karina. Second presenter, Sheikh Fayaz. from Zhejiang University in China, but you already told us before that you're currently in India, right? So we have a very international group here for sure. You bring in some more international perspectives, which you also do in your presentation on alternative innovation models from emerging economies. So floor is yours.
Thank you, Rick. Let me just upload the picture, this PPT. Okay, can you see it?
Not in the full screen yet. We are in the
okay.
presenter view.
Okay, is it now
Yes,
full screen?
it is. Thanks. Perfect.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tiago, and my panelists for this wonderful opportunity of actually sharing some of the research which we are conducting on alternative innovation models from emerging economies, policy, and perspectives. Actually, this is some work which we have been doing with United Nations General Assembly from the last couple of years. Professor Tiago, Professor Carolina has also joined these sessions. And recently we had a session, on the same theme at Academy of Management, which happened in USA, Chicago, last August. So we basically try to find out the cases from the global south and mostly the alternative innovation systems or models or practices which try to upend the dominant innovation trajectories or innovation systems. So why there's need to discuss these alternative innovations and what is the point of finding these best practices around the world? Well, we all know that we are in the middle of a polycrisis world. We are being grand challenges are lingering over us. We are battling grand challenges. Poverty is increasing. The peace deficit is growing, development deficit is ballooning, security deficit is glaring, healthcare deficit is expanding, and similarly, the environmental crisis is there, social welfare crisis is there, and even the trust deficit is actually widening. And not only these deficits are expanding, but many people around the world, they have arrived at a conclusion that probably winter has arrived because the current growth models and innovation models, they look dysfunctional. Of course, they have been a strong source for growth, affluence, technical know-how, new inventions and development. But at the same time, we see the kind of problems which we're battling, for example, stagflation, unemployment, inequality, climate crisis. They're also the result of the current existing models. And recently, we have seen the vaccine apartheid, how it created two worlds, with one world having access to all the vaccines and other medical equipment, and another world was battling and trying for even basic amenities of life. So that's why, given these kind of crises, many organizations around the world, including United Nations, OECD, there's a growing policy cry for rethinking the direction of innovation. People are saying that, we probably need hybrid sustainable models of innovation. We need growth, but it has to be smart, it has to be inclusive, and also it has to be sustainable and more green. And in fact, OECD, they have also changed the definition of innovation. Earlier it was anything, a new idea which actually creates economic values or it's exploited in the market. And now they're of this opinion that, a new idea which actually creates value becomes an innovation. So this value could be environmental value, it could be social value, it could be health value, or it could be, some other non-economic value. And within this growing policy cry for alternatives, there are a lot of new concepts and new innovation practices being documented globally. For example, in India, India is a hotbed for these frugal innovations or informal sector innovation, and we edited a book in 2015 on the same theme. And then there is this discussion about frugal innovation also coming from India and other global South countries. And from China, there is discussion about secondary innovation, which is being discussed in almost all universities in China, and I take a course on it. And then we have a handbook which Professor Gordon edited a few years back on alternative theories of innovation. So we have all these alternative concepts which are coming from different parts of the world, with different motivations and with different underpinnings. We try to put them in this handbook. And now there is another recent book, this handbook on frugal innovation. So these alternate innovation, they also revolve around these Prometheus innovation feeling, whereby the knowledge which is being created by one person will be shared globally. And then we have this discussion happening in other elite forms about compassionate innovation systems or inclusive innovation systems and etc. Now, the other question is like, why alternatives? Why are people talking about alternatives and why are they debating? Why are we finding these alternatives? Of course, I flagged some grand challenges, but at the same time, there could be some other local motivations which are actually motivating people, communities, and nations to look for alternatives. For example, there are unmet needs. Billions of people around the world, they don't have access to basic amenities of life. So, the formal markets have not addressed it to their basic challenges or basic problems. And then the communities, they started creating their own solutions, and they look for alternative ways of knowledge creation and knowledge generation. And then there could be resource constraints is another issue. For example, when COVID happened in many countries, they couldn't have, they didn't have the resources to actually invent or produce, life-saving equipment, and people started creating, these basic ventilators which I'm going to show in my presentations, like, using the locally available resources. So resource constraint could be another motivation for new innovation. There could be institutional voids. We have seen, some stringent intellectual property rights. It kills innovation in global south, and people are trying to navigate these institutional voids and creating innovations. And then there could be innovation disobedience, which probably I'm going to show in many countries. And then there are other intrinsic and extrinsic motivations for these alternative innovation systems, which we are able to document in the global south. And important reason, which was flagged by Professor Dernis Mugla and Simon Johnson in their recent 2023 book, Power and Progress. They're of this opinion that, of course, the formal knowledge of the scientific and technical knowledge is very important. It's a vital part of our story of, the prosperity which we have witnessed around the world. And of course, it's going to be the bedrock of any future process. But according to them, this broad-based prosperity of the past was not a result of any automatic guaranteed gains of technological progress. Rather, shared prosperity emerged because and only when the direction of technological advances and society's approach to dividing the gains were pushed away from the arrangements that primarily served a narrow elite. We are beneficiaries of progress mainly because our predecessors made that progress work for more people. So according to them, progress is never automatic. Today's progress is gain of a collective struggle which was put in the past by many groups, many communities. So when we talk about these alternatives, one major reason for democratizing the elitist innovation models and democratizing the knowledge generation, which is concentrated in few countries, is precisely one reason why many countries around the world are talking alternatives, and they're finding these democratized ways of knowledge and innovation, generation and diffusion. As I mentioned, it could be also innovation disobedience. For example, there could be other intrinsic and extrinsic motivations for these alternatives. We have seen, for example, when Japan colonized Korea, or when Cuba is battling this world's largest trade embargo. I went to Cuba and I was able to document some of the practices from Cuba, how Cuba is actually upending or navigating the technological embargo in the form of technological disobedience, whereby they create and invent new things using the locally available resources. And same thing happened in Korea when their technological universities were destroyed by Japan, and they started creating local solutions. And the whole innovation movement was started by shoemakers community in Korea. And in other many countries, there could be other reasons for this innovation disobedience, and people are innovating, maybe they're showing their displeasure with the dominant or elitist innovation or knowledge generation or growth practices. Or there could be other motivation. For example, as I mentioned, when COVID happened, many countries around the world were battling with serious crisis. Countries were running out of ventilators. For example, in Kashmir and in Afghanistan, a war-torn country, these schoolgirls and these unsung innovators or informal innovators, or you call them frugal or jugaad innovators, they started creating their own ventilators or own devices, using their locally available resources without taking any help from the universities or from the government. And they were able to, translate some of the technologies to hospitals, and they were able to save some of the lives, both in Kashmir and other, global South countries. Or as I mentioned, it could be also upending the dominant technology, maybe in the form of not navigating the trade embargo or technological embargo, but also, maybe to navigate the cost, because, most of the technologies comes from the rich country. Poor countries probably they can't afford, they don't have the money to, afford or use those technologies. And then, innovators in these global South countries, they try to reduce or they try to navigate the cost factor, and they try to create their own technologies. And here, both the rich firms as well as small innovators are trying to create frugal devices. For example, this was the V-Scan, which was launched by GE. The motivation was to reach to the untapped or non-consumption market. And this was one of the expensive ultrasound machine, and then they launched this low-cost machine. And similarly, innovators, they try to navigate these costs, and they create solutions for these expensive products in these global South countries. So in this part of my presentation, I'm going to talk about two alternatives because I have limited time. So one is this frugal innovation, and another is second innovation. And the reason for these two alternatives discussing here is because I work in China and I come from India. I have done almost 15, 16 years of ethnographic study with these frugal innovators in India. And from the last 5, 6 years, I have been exploring the second innovation concept in China. So we know where we have a couple of innovation models. One is according to Veblen, or model one, I call it, where you have an innovation model which is dominated by original innovation. For example, the introduction of railways was new to the world, or maybe using steam was new to the world. And that's one model whereby you have all original innovations, new to the world breakthrough technologies. But then you have model second, where which is actually dominated by adaptations, incremental innovations, and imitations, mostly driven by innovation continuities. So secondary innovation basically is a concept which is proposed by Professor Xiaobao Wu. He works at Zhejiang University and was my supervisor during my postdoc. Secondary innovation basically refers to innovation which is generated from prior ones. If there is already an original innovation, and then these local, the global South countries or maybe local firms, they try to use that as an original innovation as a springboard, and then they try to create their own innovations from learning from the original innovation. And there's a discussion about second innovation also in this book, The Power of Creative Destruction by Professor Eigen. According to Oxford Dictionary, this secondary refers to an event which happens as a result of something else. So there is already an original innovation, and then innovators and entrepreneurs, they learn from that original innovation. It's not exactly copy, but they try to use the same original innovation as a learning board, and then they find the local context, local problems, local challenges, local resources, local capabilities, and then tweak the original innovation to meet the local requirements and create their own solution. So this second innovation can emerge either in the form of digital frugal innovations, or which are low cost, or they can be very expensive innovation. For example, Haier is a Chinese company, the white good leading manufacturing company from China. They had the earlier initial learning from German labor. They learned from labor, and now the Haier's revenue in 2019 was $16.3 billion, while as the revenue for the original innovative labor was more than 9 billion euros. So you can see, for example, all the learning came from this Switzerland-based washing machine, and Haier learned from different washing machines from different parts of the world, and then they understood the local context, and they started, meeting the local requirements, reducing cost, launching new machines. But the original innovation came from the original learning came from the original innovation. For example, when they launched their washing machine first in China, it was low cost innovation, but people in the rural areas, they started using the washing machine for washing vegetables. And when they started washing vegetables, there was some malfunctioning within the machine, because the machine was not tailored to wash vegetables. It was actually designed to wash clothes. And then Haier, they saw an opportunity that, a lot of people in China, they live in the rural areas. So it's better we meet the requirements, and they launch it, the first potato washing machine in China. So the original innovation was from Germany. That was for washing clothes. But then Haier, they learned using the original innovation. They saw the local context, local problems, and building on the first innovation, they launched their own innovation. And now it's one of the, most profitable company in the world. And the second part is frugal innovation. Frugal innovation, of course, is the idea about frugal. Of course, maybe the terminology frugal or innovation is new, but the idea behind frugal innovation is as old as human civilization. We know we have been tinkering with tools, we have been tinkering with stones, bones, and so many things, and creating solutions from the locally available resources. That's basically the idea behind this frugal innovation. Adam Smith had talked about frugal innovation. I delivered a keynote lecture on Adam Smith and frugality last year at Adam Smith Business School. And then, Benjamin Franklin, he also talked about frugality. We have seen this frugal innovation, these frugal practices emerging in different parts, both in the wealthy as well as in poor nations. So frugality or frugal innovation basically is about doing more with less for many people and being creative, innovative, and resourceful in the face of institutional voids and resource constraints. As I mentioned, if you try to create any innovation or any idea which is actually meeting the local requirements of the people by navigating the institutional crisis, by navigating the market issues, by navigating the cost issues, or by navigating the technical efficiency. So we bracket all those innovations in frugal innovation. So it could be, in the form of technological disobedience, as I showed you in the case of Cuba, or it could be market-centric frugal innovation. For example, we have GE launching that vScan, or it could be social frugal innovation. For example, you have Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. It's a social, frugal innovation, creating, lifting people out of poverty using the microfinancing. Or it could be this healthcare innovation where their big companies are, wittingly reducing the cost of technology so that they reach maximum people. Or it could be, for example, community-driven frugal innovation, crisis-driven frugal innovation. We saw in the COVID, people started creating their own technologies, and it could be maybe, navigating institutional resource voids. And then another concept, which is very close to frugal innovation, is grassroots innovation. The only difference between frugal innovation and grassroots innovation is actually emerging at the grassroots level, without taking much help or assistance from the firms. While as frugal innovation is practiced both by the rich firms as well as poor countries or poor communities. So this is also a nascent, discussion, nascent concept. Gross innovation from the last 2 decades has attracted huge attention, both from development and innovation scholars. It's basically also seen as a counter concept to market creating technological innovation. And as I mentioned, the only difference between grassroots and frugal is that grassroots is done by grassroots communities without taking help from the universities or from the rich firms, while as frugal innovations are practiced both by the communities from the bottom up as well as, the rich firms. And then this grassroots innovation is, somehow similar to what Professor Levy has talked about, this bricolage and savage minds. He's also, of course, of this opinion that, it's also about using locally available resources, recombination of resources for new purpose and making do. So that's what grassroots innovators do. They try to use these locally available resources. They don't rely much on the firms. They don't rely much on the market. They try to use those challenges which they face in day-to-day life and then convert those challenges into opportunities by creating different things out of it. So in India, Mahatma Gandhi was the first person who talked about this alternative, and he was promoting this charkha because he saw, the dominant technology which was coming particularly from the rich countries as a source which is subverting people, which is, subjugating people. So in subverting that hegemonic nature of the technology, he proposed this alternative democratized forms of technology in 1909. In the first book, which was published in India, the title of the book is Hind Swaraj. And then there are many organizations in India which have started, mapping or documenting the grassroots creativity in India. For example, National Innovation Foundation of India is a Department of Science and Technology body. They have scouted more than 300,000 grassroots innovators and traditional knowledge practices from India. And then you have this Barefoot College of India. They try to democratize the complex technologies, and they take this complex technology to the rural areas, for example, solar engineering, and then they train grandmothers in the poor regions of India and Africa, whereby they try to, adopt or apply Gandhian philosophy of empowering people using technology. So this demystification of complex technology is also happening in India. And then we have Honeybee Network that's also looking for these traditional and unsung, informal or grassroots innovators from India. I have also done some work, back in 2011, I published a book, Unsung Innovators of Kashmir, whereby I started mapping these unsung innovators from different parts of the India. And this was informal sector innovation, which we edited in 2015. And from 2006 till now, I have been following, these grassroots innovators, like how they take their technology to the market without relying on the universities or formal structures, and what are the motivations for creating new technologies or looking for alternatives, and what kind of crises or challenges they face. Now, government in India as well as in China, they are trying to somehow bank or build on these alternate innovation. They're trying to mainstream these local innovation activities. But in terms of scale up, or in terms of creating that mass diffusion of these innovation, government of India has created a lot of policies. They have created a lot of incentives, but somehow they have failed to actually create a strong or huge impact using these local innovation, precisely because the motivation for grassroots innovators is completely different than the formal innovators, because formal innovators, they are profit driven, they are market driven, and these innovations are completely social driven. There could be other motivations but profit. But there are some policy challenges which I have been able to notice while talking to these innovators. First is the directionality and policy coordination failure, because the government of India, they try to use the top-down policy approach to scale up these innovation without taking innovators needs into consideration, or their motivation into consideration. So that's one reason why they are not able to create an impact using these innovation. Like in China, they have created local innovation systems, regional innovation systems, and then you have a strong, vibrant national innovation system. In the local innovation system, they try to co-create knowledge using these informal or unsung innovators, using the locally available resources and capabilities. And then we have this role of intermediaries and universities. They seldom talk to or engage with these informal innovators or grassroots innovators, and financing is also an issue. Incentivizing is another problem. In India, some of organizations, they try to incentivize these grassroots innovators using patent. They think that patent could be a strong motivator for them, or for these kind of innovation. When I was talking to these innovators, I found that patent is completely a useless thing, which is being used to incentivize these grassroots innovators, because they had no idea of what's patent, and they don't know how to use patent because their motivations are altogether different. And then we have this standardization and large-scale commercialization problems, which is being reported by grassroots innovators. For example, when COVID happened, many innovators, they try to create many important devices. Some were successful in translating those technologies to hospitals, but many innovators, they struggled because different countries, particularly in global south, they have this standardization process is curated for formal innovation. There is no space for these kind of innovations. When they try to scale up those innovations, they face challenges because they have to meet the international or the national standards, which are not really flexible for these kind of local innovations. For example, this gentleman, he got patent, probably the first person in Kashmir who got patent in 1977. He applied for a seed money. He failed to take his technology to the market because the seed money given to him back in 1977 was very meager. And instead of appreciating his creative efforts, he was taken to jail because he ended up being a bank defaulter. He couldn't repay the money. So that's how he was actually given the patent. Of these kind of innovators, which I was talking about, they came up with different devices during COVID-19, but because of the standardization, or because of financing problems, or because of the strong engagement with the formal universities or engineering institutions, they somehow were not able to, convert their technologies to for the large-scale use. So in conclusion, we know formal dominant innovation models need a rethink. Embracing second innovation driven by frugality, I have been seeing, for example, how second innovation is creating strong impact, both in terms of poverty elevation, both in terms of creating economic incentives, both in terms of empowering the innovators who's working in China. I think that second innovation concept probably could be used in other countries. Maybe that has a strong, that can guide these alternatives, whereby they can not only overcome the problems they are facing, but they can also benefit community at large. And also, poor countries, they cannot invest in R&D and fundamental research base. Learning from existing innovation could be less expensive option. And so, investing in these short cycle things, or maybe probably adopting this Promethean innovation system, whereby Prometheus, by stealing the fire, he shared the fire with the whole world, could be an option. We need to create innovation hotspots in peripheries. Rural areas are always, they have remained outside this innovation radar, and these alternatives are probably a way to engage with the rural communities. And we need not only to look these alternatives in terms of creating economic or profits for the local community, but also in terms of how they are living with every day using these kind of innovations. So it becomes a kind of, question of life and death for these rural communities, whereby they have their own traditional practices, they have their own knowledge, they have their own innovations, whereby, they are giving a different meaning to those rural communities. And of course, innovation happening in rural settings are different from innovations we create from the urban settings, because the nature of innovation, which I have been documented in urban areas, is radically different from the innovation which is taking place in the rural areas. For example, the community involvement, no use of intellectual property rights, using locally available resources, being very kind of, creating sustainability or taking environment consideration are some of the features which are witnessed in these rural innovation or in alternatives. And lastly, top-down innovation models are not working probably in many countries. We have seen problems happening in the rich countries as well as poor countries. So we need to give bottom-up innovations a try. And of course, we need to create a discussion or maybe incentives or maybe, some mechanism whereby we can create more meaning for these alternative innovations. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Very interesting. I was just about to tell you to come towards the conclusion when you opened the conclusion slide. Very nice. Maybe you can stop the screen sharing again so we can see everybody, and then we open the floor for questions. Don't see anybody raising their hand yet. Actually, I've been sitting on a question. Well, I want to say since the beginning of the presentation, it's not completely true, but very early on, I was thinking, well, what's the role of patenting? And in the end, you actually answered it to a very large extent. But what I was wondering, I mean, you say that this patenting doesn't really work in the sense of incentivizing actors locally to well, work on the innovation and patent them and commercialize them. But what about the other way around in terms of, well, basically that put it a bit bluntly, stealing ideas from abroad, like with the example of Liebherr and Heyerist. China is kind of notorious for it in the West, stealing the technology and just copying it. But I just very generally wondering about how does patenting play a role, infringement of patent rights, and indeed also patenting within the system, within the countries themselves, which you already answered, but not maybe this first part of my question that you didn't really address yet.
Yeah, well, for innovations happening in India, in terms of gross innovation, as I mentioned, NIF's National Innovation Foundation of India, they have documented more than 300,000 grassroots innovation traditional practices from 500 villages of India. And, for maybe they have applied for some 700-800 patents, which are granted to them. So when I was talking to the people, who have received patents, like what are the benefits which they have received by getting the patents? First thing is, when they conceptualize a technology or innovation, it's not intended to go to the market. So they want to overcome the problems which are created by the market. And when you are probably, creating this knowledge, they use a community. For example, a technology happening in the rural area, they learn from each other, father, mother, sister, they join the whole innovation endeavor. And when you're giving patents, so you're giving exclusive monopoly to one innovator, excluding the community help which is receiving. But leaving that topic aside, when I was talking to innovators, like what kind of benefits they get from by getting this patent, the first answer I get from them is that it's said that patent is a monopoly which can give us exclusive monopoly for 20 years in the market when we go to the market, and then we actually create economic value out of it. So they don't go to the market, so no point giving any kind of protection. And the second is they wittingly share the technology with the people. For example, when COVID happened, when they created these local ventilators, they used Facebook. They were telling people that, look, this is how we are creating our ventilator. And if you need any kind of help, please go and come and share this. So this free sharing of knowledge is one of the important component within this informal and grassroots innovation movement. They don't want to protect the knowledge. Instead, they go against this protection. They want to democratize it by moving away from the patenting culture. They have no idea about patent. And now, after patent is granted to them, after a few years, they don't know that they have to manage patents. And to manage patents, they have to pay money. Because when your innovation is not in the market, when you're not creating an economic value out of your technology, So you don't have money to manage the patent. And then after 5 years, they are informed that, look, your patent is lapsed because you were not able to manage your patents. You were not able to pay the fee. So when the whole process, now the government, which is trying to incentivize these innovators by giving them kind of protection or monopoly, they are not using neither protection nor using this as a monopoly, because they're not going to the market and they are trying to subvert the dominant technology, because dominant technology model is protected by patents. It works for firms, it works for rich firms, it works for rich innovators, entrepreneurs, and this alternative is actually a response to this dominance. And when they try to create alternative, they move away from all the incentives or the structures which protect the formal or dominant innovation. And now coming back to China, for example, the second innovation thing, which is learning from an original innovation. I have been documenting many innovations. For example, I showed you the case of Haier. Haier is now one of the most reputed 500 big firms in the world, creating these white good technologies, for example, washing machines and refrigerators and too many other things. There is not a single lawsuit against Haier for infringing the technology which is coming from the West or America. And that's why Haier is more dominant in America and in Europe than in China. It's almost everywhere. But now, how was Haier able to? They actually used the original innovation. For example, you have trains, first originally introduced in England, and then France probably learning from the original innovation. The only difference was in England, it was in the hands of the private entrepreneurs, and in France, railways was undertaken by the government. And then China learning from the railways. The tracks were same, the technology was same, but then now China is the world's #1 in terms of high-speed railways. But it's not that China was the first to launch railways. Railways come from England, but then they use these original innovations as a springboard, and then they use the local requirement. For example, when Haier learned from the German company that this is the way to wash clothes, but then the Haier they were introduced to a new problem of washing vegetables. Washing vegetables probably was not a problem in Switzerland. It was a problem in China because a lot of people were living in the rural areas, and they needed a technology which will actually help them. And Haier designed the world's first potato washing machine in the world. So that was not actually infringing or stealing the technology from the West, but it was actually using the original innovation as a springboard and then finding new windows of opportunities and then going into those windows of opportunities. And why are they actually trying to do is because why we encourage it for probably global South countries. For example, internet is almost everywhere in the global South. So the use of e-commerce is probably not as vibrant in global South than probably in China or maybe in other rich countries. So what we're educating is that maybe, if we use this internet or this technology, or maybe use some new artificial intelligence, which is probably pervasive, which is available everywhere. So we will be able to create short cycle innovations by learning from the best practices from the world without actually, infringing or stealing or copying exactly that technology, because the context is different, the requirement of different needs are different, and I'm sure the innovative solutions will be radically different.
Thanks a lot. We would have time for maybe 1 or 2 shorter questions. I don't see any. Then we can happily move on to the next presentation. So thanks again for your talk, very interesting. And let's move on with final presentation of this session by Monica Edwards-Schachter from the Valencian International University in Spain. So Monica, floor is yours. You can share the screen and
thank you.
Talk us through your talk.
Okay. I need to find the presentation.
No, we're not
some slides from the previous presentation. Are you looking?
We're not in full screen yet. Yeah, now, excellent.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks. Yep.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity of sharing this presentation. That is a very, very preliminary draft about a study that I'm performing about the evolving landscape of innovation governance, trying to find some insights and future perspectives. And why the motivation of this study? Well, I love complex problems, so I decided that we haven't yet a clear idea of what the term innovation governance means. And the term innovation governance has gained increasing attention in academia. In the last year, I thought these conceptual boundaries remain blurred. As in this sense, in this paper, this study presents preliminary findings, or more than findings, reflections about a systematic review of the concept, considering the perspective of science, technology, and innovation policy studies. And following the two principal questions, what does the concept of innovation governance mean? How is defined in the context of science, technology, and innovation policy studies? And what can we say about the evolution of the innovation governance concept, and why? What can we say also about the gaps and dilemmas about their implementation, and in considering specifically the broad nature of innovation and the inclusion of the variety forms of innovation, the so-called forgotten X innovations, for example, the case of social innovation. So the methodology I followed is a bibliometric analysis, together a qualitative analysis of selected documents with the use of some software. And here in the table, we can see that the term innovation governance is not usual together, because usually we have much about governance and innovation on one side and governance on other sides. But I found 20 and 25 articles or documents in Web of Science, and 265 documents in Scopus that I'm analyzing. But also considering the extensive literature, I'm using the snowball technique, and are in the process of the filtering and ending all the selection of these documents. In detail, in this figure, we can see that the attention paid has increased from 20,000 to date. Here is the evolution, considering the articles talking about innovation governance in Scopus, but the distribution is similar in Web of Science. And here the big problem, that is, we have a lot of different strands of literatures from social sciences, around 22%, business management with a similar percentage, economics, around 11%, and a lot of contribution from other strands of research, from energy, computer science, environmental sciences, engineering, etc., etc. And here, an overview of the fragmentation of the field. We can see that governance is separate sometimes from innovation governance, from innovation or governance approach. Here I show some exploration that I'm doing previously to finish the selected papers. Here, for instance, we can see that innovation governance really is related with different sectoral sectors of innovation, and talking about the problem solving, the governance structures, that innovation engagement, but at the same time, in considering the traditional literature about technology transfer, service innovation, etc., etc. I found several, which is the problem, a lot of clusters that are overlapping. One cluster, for instance, about financial innovation, innovation ecosystems, innovation efficiency, innovation performance, and others. We can see here all the clusters I found, but others that are very different. For instance, dealing with regional innovation, research and innovation, responsible innovation, and social innovation. Also, this software enables to analyze the evolution in the last years with increased attention to sustainable development, climate change, responsible innovation. In yellow, we can see the much literature that comes from China and several contributions about the hot topic right now, which is artificial intelligence. Also considering ethics, innovation processes, industry. Really, the analysis at this stage in this form is a mess. The articulation of all these different kind of literature strands. What can we say about the concept of innovation governance? It can be observed a lot of adjectives or different kinds of types of forms of innovation governance: reflexive, collaborative, participatory, distributive, experimentalist, transformative, multi-level, adaptive, anticipatory, explorative. And each of these forms have their own definitions. So considering the origin of the concept, and it has not have a single point of origin, as we can observe the evolution over time across the strands of research. Perhaps the prominence began in the field of innovation around 20 years ago, but there are much literature that is previous, talking about governance and perhaps not explicitly considering the word innovation. Also, there are much literature discussing the role of governance, instruments, mechanisms that shape innovation processes in the context of regional and national innovation systems, literature in the case of Lundvall, Ashame, etc., etc. And I think that in the last 10 years, the development of the concept is strongly linked to policy studies, particularly in relation to the governance of technological change and policies of research and development and innovation policies. But also in the field of management, the idea of innovation governance is strongly focused on corporate governance and technology governance, and with topics such as decision-making structures and the role of the builders of innovation ecosystems. This is the pending task. This is a work in progress, so still I can't provide a consensus about the definition of innovation governance. There are a lot of definitions that I need reflect on how to finish the analysis, but we can find in the literature a lot of descriptions about governance concerning the system and practices used in innovation processes, related to the development of governing styles, or the emergence of new methods, or change in governing rules, on governing regulations, the dynamic interrelationships of different stakeholders, considering resources, interests, power, debates about the negotiation between actors. There are a lot of case studies about these points, and also the emergence of different kind of policy instruments. Overall, governance is understood as an instrument, or the arena where societal actors and the state interact and coordinate the issues related to innovation processes. Governance also means rules, processes, and behavior that affect the way in which powers are exercised, particularly considering openness, participation, accountability, effectiveness, and coherence. I have not time to detail all the processes. I really think that I need two papers or one paper in two parts for the analysis. But to refer in this case or to the different concepts that I consider that are very, very interesting, the evolution of the concepts about innovation governance. Here are some examples about adaptive governance that entails stakeholder participation and linking institutions across different scales from the perspective of complex adaptive systems. Here, I think that is interesting to the differentiation between adaptation, considering the concept of tentative governance, because tentative governance refers more to exploration and experimentation, something like as heuristic, or a detailed analysis of hard and soft regulations in the innovation processes, while adaptation is more reactive about what is happening, as in the case, for example, of artificial intelligence governance. Reflexive governance is seen more from the point of view of the literature of responsible research and innovation, and responsible innovation, and consider in the role of uncertainty, ambiguity, the unintended effects of innovation processes. And I think that in all the cases, the principal point here is how useful and effective different governance modes or arrangements might be in fostering the successful innovation processes. I think that we need to consider in detail the role of the latest strand of literature about innovation governance, focused on transformative governance, and that involves several strands of literature from ecology, from sustainability transitions, and also science and technology studies, together with innovation policies. I think that this is the more profound vision about governance that deals with the need of systemic change, and at least in the narratives, involves not only technological innovation, but also social, institutional, and behavioral transformations, or different kind of innovations. I think that the term is not new, because I think that it emerged around 10 years or more ago, linked with the wicked global problems and all the narratives on ground challenges. but I think that the literature is very consistent in developing this perspective of transformative, sustainable transitions of innovation processes, connecting complex adaptive system, innovation ecosystems, and with adaptive and participatory governance. So other relevant strand of literature come from public administration, where we can find different paradigms considering the relationships between administration and the role of the state, and the citizens and the participation of citizens. Citizens from a role of the state as the regulator, from the bureaucratic paradigm to other paradigms like the citizens considered as consumers, and the participatory paradigm where the responsibility is shared between administration and citizens. The latest or more recent literature about this is platform paradigm, which is very critical, considering the role of the administration as an enabler that empowers citizens to the co-creation of public value, of public services by themselves. And in this case, the administration or the state acts as an enabler to provide some spaces like, for instance, co-working spaces. Sorry, I need to put to extend my connection. Sorry. The platform paradigm consider the role of the state as an enabler that provides several spaces within the ecosystems or innovation ecosystems for facilitating the role of citizen in co-creating public value or service in response to the societal needs. So, in concerning the responsible innovation, governance entails multiple processes and control, related control and management, but is the most inclusive view of the active participation of stakeholders. And there are much literature considering ecosystems, but also, for instance, many case studies from the perspective of the quadruple and quintuple helix, considering the participation of academy, industry, public organization, society at large in developing different kind of innovation processes. Ideally, stakeholders can collaborate in this way, but I think that is more a normative narrative than the realm of innovation processes. The core idea of this paradigm is the emphasis in the how, the why, and the what of innovation processes, and always aligned with the purpose of consider the broad social impact. And of course, from this perspective, the governance focus is on the strong alignment of research policy and societal values. In my analysis, what I'm doing right now is considering the evolution of generation of different innovation policies, from the linear model to the second model around the 60s, from the science push market demand pull towards the third interactive model of innovation policy, and what I consider the fourth strand of of literature that is focused on transformative innovation. For time, I can't detail all the aspects that I'm considering here, but the idea is to consider the evolution of the governance innovation from this perspective. Of course, taking into account the government role. At this respect, for instance, in several contributions very relevant of Edler and Borras, talk about a huge variety of the state roles in different innovation processes. In a contribution of 2014, they identify 13 modes or roles of the state as a participator in innovation systems. Even they are not talking about the entrepreneurial role of the state, but and they developed a detailed 4 case studies about cryptocurrencies, smart cities, in transport and nuclear power, analyzing the diversity of roles of the states. Other strand of literature is about management.
Monica, it would be great if you could work towards the conclusion, so there's some time for discussion.
Okay, so, well, I think with the help of corporate governance, which is more traditional focus, here are the conclusions, the very preliminary conclusions. The review reveals that the concept of innovation governance remains under-theorized and is often framed with the evolution of science, technology, of innovation and innovation policies, or the role of governance from the broader socio-economic governance perspectives, with less emphasis or little attention to the realm of innovation processes themselves. The term innovation governance is polysemic, encompassing a variety of governance forms. Innovation governance has become increasingly fragmented and diversified. There are a lot of different case studies with debates in sector-specific innovation processes, such as is the case of artificial intelligence governance. There is a diversity of views, understanding, and rationales regarding innovation governance, diverging perspective on the nature and the role of innovation policy. There are a lot of different imperatives, strong focus on innovation governance as a policy problem, but a lot of discoordination between horizontal and vertical views of innovation governance or the harmonization of multi-sectoral innovation policies. I think that overall, we can see that perspective on the governance of innovation have shifted from a centralized approach to a more participatory and reflexive role of stakeholders. But this is a very broad narrative. And of course, always the aim is sustainability transitions to achieve economic, social, and environmental goals. This is the transformative innovation policy agendas. However, persistent biases toward technological innovation narrow the scope of innovation governance and still exclude many forms of hidden hidden innovations or neglected forms, like the case of social innovation. Additional points that are still a work in progress is the development of participatory policy instruments and their effectiveness, and a question that is in my mind about the future. I really observe different systems of innovation governance in different innovation processes according to different sectors. So should research place greater emphasis on innovation governance as a system of governance itself? This is my last question. Thank you, and sorry for for exceeding the time.
Right, thanks a lot. We still have a couple of minutes for questions left, so that's all good. We saved a little bit of time at the beginning. All right, so the floor is open for questions, comments.
Maybe I can do a couple of comments.
Please go ahead.
Well, I
Please
like,
give me some feedback.
yeah. No, just a feedback, just a general commentary for each one. For Karina, very interesting this debate on termination. From an inside perspective of social innovation. You are both experts in the area. And we are seeing the last couple of years, these STS communities are currently debating the decline, right, of socio-technical systems. So it's very much in the moment. But I was wondering, because I was speaking about that yesterday, there is an older literature on public policy, on dismantling, reversal, withdrawing. I was wondering if you are with a conversation with this literature from the 70s and the 80s that could be interesting for you to expand a bit your discussion with the literature. It's not particularly focused on innovation, but it's focused on public policies in general. So I would recommend you do this reading. I know Michael Bauer in Firenze is doing something, trying to retrieve these literatures. For Payaso, we already know for a while. So I do think we have much to learn, right? From different geographical experiences here. A lot of convergences I see between frugal grassroots here in Latin America. We are still talking very much on PS, social technology. And even China building on secondary innovation seems an example for our mainstreams, right? I think it was very interesting. And I would like to thank you, Monica, for the great systematization and the literature review on innovation governance. You are, going deep after the special issue, the thematic issue we had, you organized here in NOvation. And indeed, polystemic, right? The concept and the uses of governance and how they are applying to innovation. I would like to suggest you, just a suggestion, you to submit this study to the ongoing thematic issue we are, Carolina and Rafael are organizing, and it's pretty much synchronized with the forum. We already have a lot of papers, but I think your study on governance could be an interesting addition. So think about it. We would love to have your contribution for this uh, thematic issue in the making on alternative innovation models for public policy models for innovation. So it was very interesting. So there is just a general comment. I thank you very much, you all three, for your contribution to our forum. And Rick, please.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tiago. Just want to look around quickly if there's any other questions still. Because if not, maybe we can invite the speakers to just respond like very quickly, just in 1 minute or so to Tiago's comments, and then we can also round this session off. Maybe Karina, you want to kick it off?
Right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Tiago. I think we do not actually pick up all this literature like directly, but indirectly, I would say, with all this phase out and so on. But it's a great suggestion. So thank you. I think we will look at it.
There is a lot of insights on dismantling as well. It's very interesting
Yeah.
how the politicians and the actors involved, they don't anticipate how to behave in this kind of circumstances. So could be interesting. Well, you have several historical examples of dismantling with neoliberal policies, but you could learn a bit on that literature, I think. I'm finding very interesting for my interests.
No, it's great. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks. Fayez, do you want to respond still? No, not really a question, I think, in your direction, but please go ahead.
I just had a comment. I completely agree with Professor Tiago. There's so much to learn from each other, particularly from, Latin America, because there are some amazing practices which we have come across, at least in the literature when I had an opportunity of visiting Brazil, but it was for a short time. But of course, there's a lot of things, a lot of commonalities between the innovation models, particularly when you talk about alternatives or these X innovations. So there are so many commonalities and so many things to learn from these things. I think I completely agree with Professor Tiago. Maybe this convergence, maybe this discussion can lead us to furthermore some new convergences whereby we can actually share more such stories and probably try to theorize them in a nicer way, and then share the insights with both the global north and take some practices from global north and see how this north-south collaboration can take a different innovation direction.
Thanks. Monica, you can close the session with last comments.
Well, many thanks for the insights about innovation, because this is the realm of innovation processes and not the broad narratives about transformative, transformative innovation policies are really present in the innovation processes, accompanying the innovation processes. And in the case of Fayad, I took your last comment about dominant innovation models. And I say right now that dominant governance innovation models needs a rethink. So thank you very much
thank you so
for
much.
your
Thank
insights.
All right. Then we can round off this session. Thank you all. Thanks to the speakers for their inputs. Very interesting presentations, I think. We're nicely on schedule, so thanks for that as well. I think the program will continue in Brazil offline for the first part, and I think the final part in the end will be streamed online again. So yeah, all the best.
Journey
Thanks
here.
a lot.
Thank you very much,
and
people.
Enjoy the rest of the
Let's
conference
keep in touch.
Brazil.
Thank you.
We will. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.